The Ride1Up Prodigy XC is a Class 3 e-bike designed to combine the value and comfort of a commuter bike with the capability of a cross-country mountain bike. That makes it, at least on paper, an extremely versatile bike. And given Ride1Up's reputation for making value-packed bikes, we're excited to get our hands on one for review. And while its single-track capability may be a bit of a stretch, we're for the most part pretty impressed with this $2,400 e-hybrid. At the heart of the Prodigy XC is an alloy frame with some surprisingly high-quality touch points that you wouldn't expect from a bike at this price point. For starters, the head tube has some beautifully disguised welds connecting the hydroform tubes, mimicking the appearance of a carbon frame. It also features internally routed cables with the option to run an internally routed dropper post should you choose to add one down the road. Lastly, the frame comes with a chainstay mounted kickstand, 2 sets of mount points inside the front triangle, and mounts for a rear rack or fenders. The Prodigy XC's geometry is relatively akin to what you'd find on a modern cross-country bike, with a 67-degree head tube angle, 27.5-inch wheels, and 440mm chainstays. Interestingly, the bike is only available in one size, which Ride1Up says should fit riders anywhere from 5'6" to 6'4". This single size has a reach of 376mm, a stack height of 669mm, and a 480mm long seat tube. At 6'1", I'm in the middle of the bike's size range and felt that the bike's extremely short reach and relatively high stack put me in an awkward, cramped position. I can't imagine seeing someone 3 inches taller than me on the bike. Next, let's talk part spec, starting with the e-drive system. The Prodigy XC utilizes a Brose TF Sprinter motor with a maximal assistance of 90 Nm paired to a 504 Wh battery. I was very impressed with the silent and smooth power delivery that lacked almost any noticeable sensation when transitioning from pedaling to coasting. The only time this was noticeable was while shifting, as the Brose torque sensor cut power completely for about a second, reminding you just how much assistance you were receiving from the motor. Speaking of assistance, the Prodigy XC has 4 power modes: Eco, Tour, Sport, and Boost. I stayed in the second highest Sport mode for most of my riding around town, but preferred the Tour mode when out on single-track trails. One slight bummer was that despite Brose's claim of having an app available, I could never find one on the iOS store. That said, I was extremely impressed with the bar-mounted display. It had quite a few metrics to cycle between, including assist level, wattage, speed, range, and distance. I completed a range test in Sport mode, and the bike managed to deliver 28.8 miles or 46.3 kilometers, with 1,010 feet or 370.8 kilometers of climbing. This is just shy of the 30 to 50 mile range that Ride1Up claims on their website, but I am a bit on the larger side and was riding in some relatively hilly terrain in the second to highest power assist mode. At this point, Ride1Up does not offer a range extender for this bike, but it'd be awesome to see one in the future. The rest of the part spec on the bike is just about what you'd expect from an off-road oriented e-commuter. Up front is a generic 120mm air-sprung fork with adjustable rebound and compression. I was impressed by how smoothly it moved through its travel with very little stiction and gentle bottom out. Drivetrain responsibilities are a mix between Microshift and Shimano, with a Microshift Advent 9-speed shift lever and derailleur paired to a Shimano Alivio 11 to 34 tooth cassette. This, paired with a 42 tooth chainring, provided enough range to make it up moderately steep single-track climbs and max out the Class 3's assistance governor of 28 miles per hour. I was also pleased with the Tektro HD M745 4-piston brakes that provided plenty of power and control. Lastly, the 2.4-inch Maxxis Forecaster tires were a nice touch, blending rolling speed through town and grip while riding off-road or in inclement weather. In total, this put the weight of my Prodigy XC without pedals at 52.6 pounds or 23.9 kilograms. Lastly, it's worth noting that the Prodigy is available in a couple other build options, including a step-through and standard frame that have an integrated rear rack and rigid fork. Ride1Up is a direct-to-consumer company, meaning if you want to get yourself a Prodigy XC, you're going to need to order it online and build it up from the box. Thankfully, this was a super easy and straightforward process. All I had to do was install the bars, front wheel, and included pedals, and I was good to go. The icing on the cake was the inclusion of a pretty nice set of hex keys and this sweet Ride1Up hat that I'm wearing right now. So with the bike fully built, it was time to start logging some miles around town, where it felt pretty much like a modern take on a traditional hybrid. The upright riding position provided great visibility, and the slacker head tube angle and short chainstays made plowing through the gravel-filled bike lanes and hopping on and off curbs a breeze. Thankfully for me, the weather held off while testing this bike, but I never got a chance to ride it in some rainy or snowy conditions, but I'd imagine those Maxxis Forecaster tires would do pretty well there. Next, it was time to see how the Prodigy XC fared on some mild beginner cross-country mountain bike trails. and given the XC moniker in its name, I was cautiously optimistic about how well it would do. My ride started out with a relatively mellow, flowy climb and descent, during which the bike's supple suspension and excellent tire choice fooled me into thinking this might be a closet trail bike after all. But the second the trail turned even marginally technical, its shortfallings became clear. The bike's tight geometry made it feel pretty twitchy, and despite weighing over 50 pounds, the bike would bounce back and forth while going down the trail. Speaking of bouncing, the kickstand and cable routing was extremely noisy, and the front brake hose had an annoying habit of folding below the fork arch and rubbing against the tire. And while it could be argued that many of these issues were more sensory and not really related to the build quality of the bike, it was definitely far from confidence inspiring. I'm sure that by removing the kickstand and adding a handful of zip ties to the cluttered cable routing, you could quiet this bike down just a bit, but all in all, I think it's better to think of this bike more of a e-hybrid bike than a cross-country mountain bike. The e-hybrid market is a competitive one, with dozens of bikes sold by other direct-to-consumer companies like Ride1Up, as well as more established traditional retail companies sold in local bike shops. In general, you can expect better value, at least on paper, from direct-to-consumer companies because they're cutting out that middleman. But B2C companies still have their own advantages as well. You get that connection with your local bike shop. They're usually a bit higher quality bikes and oftentimes come with better service and warranties. With that in mind, the first bike we'll compare the Prodigy XC to is the Trek Marlin Plus 6, which lists for $2,699, $300 more than the Ride1Up. For that, you'll get a smaller Bosch 50 Nm motor and 400 Wh battery, which reduces the battery range and assistance, but also weight. The Trek weighs just 49.5 pounds or 22.5 kilograms, noticeably less than the Prodigy XC. Despite its higher price, the Marlin Plus 6 gets comparable, albeit different components than the Prodigy XC. Now, where the Trek really sets itself apart is with its more refined geometry. It's available in 5 different sizes, the smaller two getting 27.5-inch wheels and the rest with 29ers, making it easy to find a bike that will fit you well, which is especially important if you plan to do any trail riding. In total, both the Prodigy XC and Marlin Plus are great bikes, but are going to be best in different settings. If I was choosing a bike as an entryway into e-mountain biking, I would definitely go with the Trek, mostly due to the option to get a bike that would fit my larger frame better, but also for the weight savings. But if I was planning to largely use the bike as a commuter in a mountain town with variable weather and mixed terrain, then I'd opt for the more powerful motor and longer battery range of the Ride1Up. The next bike that I want to compare the Prodigy XC to comes from another direct-to-consumer company that's been steadily gaining popularity over the last few years, and that's the Rad Power Bike's RadRover 6 Plus. This bike lists for $2,099, $300 less than the Prodigy XC, and gets a larger 672 Wh battery that's connected to a hub drive motor, putting the total weight of the bike at a portly 72.5 pounds or 32.9 kilograms. The RadRover is available in 2 frames, a high step and a step through, which collectively claim to fit riders from 5'2" to 6'2". Lastly, the Ride1Up's name brand, oftentimes mountain bike specific components, far outshine the mostly generic part spec of the RadRover. To me, the decision between these two bikes is easy. The Prodigy XC not only looks better, but its more refined components and frame should make the bike ride better longer as well. Ride1Up as a whole has done a great job at bridging the gap between more budget-oriented e-commerce bikes like the RadRover and higher-end, more expensive models that you'd find sold at a traditional bike shop. And I think the Prodigy XC is a great example of this. To recap, if you're looking for an e-hybrid bike with just a bit more capability for riding off-road and in rough weather conditions, then I think the Ride1Up Prodigy XC is a great option. But don't let its name fool you into thinking that this is an e-mountain bike. This bike belongs and excels in less technical terrain. If you have any more questions about the Prodigy XC, you can leave those down there in the comments and I'll be sure to get back to you on that. While you're there, if you haven't done so already, I'd appreciate it if you take just a second to like this video, as well as subscribe to the 99 Spokes YouTube channel, where we upload new videos every Friday. Lastly, remember that bikes are for everyone. Have fun out there.